bring it to the court's attention.
So nothing you want to bring up today?
Right.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so Attorney Opera, you referenced a couple of other issues, one of which I already took under advisement. I think I addressed the timing. I think that leaves the face mask issue that you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, there's a couple other things here on my checklist, Your Honor, but we can go to the face mask issue.
All right, go ahead.
It's appropriate. Your Honor, I have a request as to Mr. Brooks wearing a face mask at all times in the courtroom. Frankly, I'm not sure the reason behind that. I guess it really doesn't matter, other than to indicate there's certainly no court order requiring that, nor is there any requirement by the sheriff's office that he be required to wear a face mask in court. My concern is that identification of this defendant may be a significant issue in this case. The jury will be shown multiple videos and photographs of the driver of the SUV throughout the trial. They will hear testimony from eyewitnesses that we believe will identify the driver of the vehicle, but ultimately, that is a question they will have to be concerned with themselves and be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Brooks is the person who committed these crimes that he's accused of. And with the face mask that he's been wearing to court, I think almost every time, if not every time, I think impedes that ability of the jury to reach that conclusion as to identification of the defendant. So my request is that he not wear one, but if there's some legitimate reason or medical reason or need for the mask, then at least there has to be appropriate lengthy occasions where the jury again can observe Mr. Brooks at the defense table and assist them in making that conclusion as to his identification. So, I mean, if this trial lasts 3 or 4 weeks, I don't think 5 minutes is a fair compromise there. I would be asked that he be required to be without the mask for some substantial period of time, again, so that the jurors can observe him. And many of the recordings and photographs are quick screenshots and very short in duration. So it's not as if, we have a portrait that we could say, here's the portrait of the driver and here's Mr. Brooks, and you could just have him take off his mask for 5 minutes and that would be sufficient in our opinion. So that's our request, is that he be ordered to remove the face mask for the whole trial. If the court won't go that far, then for at least sufficient amount of time for the jury to reach its own conclusions. And obviously he'll have to do it temporarily when the witnesses are asked to identify him as well.
Attorney Perry, I know there's not a written motion on this, so if you need some time to think about it, if you're prepared to address, great, I'll turn it over to you. But I know I'm first hearing this. Not a surprise, I would say. I had thought about some of the identification issues and how would we do that given the mask, but how would you like to handle that?
Well, I am surprised at the request that he be not permitted to wear a mask at all during the course of the trial. It's one thing if it were tailored to a particular witness, their described ability to perhaps identify him, and if needed in a particular moment, to take it up that way. But I mean, surely this isn't, we aren't so far removed from COVID that it's a mystery as to why somebody might be wearing a mask. Mr. Brooks has been consistent, I think, at the jail and court with being masked. It's not at all uncommon. I think when we walked into the courthouse today, there was somebody, one of the security persons wearing a face mask. That's still it's less and less common, but that's still the world we find ourselves in. And for him to be taking those precautions to remain healthy, which frankly, with this desire not to have any delays, is kind of would assist with that. So I would certainly object to any just blanket ruling that Mr. Brooks not be permitted to wear a mask. I would think that anybody in this courtroom should remain permitted to wear a mask if they felt that that was necessary for themselves without having to provide, a doctor's note or some special circumstance to permit that. So I guess I think that's how I'd ask that this be handled is, if it's if there's testimony that, I saw Mr. Brooks face on, and, in order for me to identify him, I would need to see his whole face. I think, we should address it that way in the hearing, and we can be on advance notice that, for the minute that's necessary, that he, expose his face to a witness. But I would absolutely object to an order that if myself or Attorney Keyes or Mr. Brooks wished to wear a mask in a public setting, if one of us were feeling symptomatic or nervous about whoever's at home, we haven't been wearing masks, but Mr. Brooks has, I would very strongly object to an order that he not be permitted to wear a mask during the trial.
I am not at all interested in delving into any personal reasons why a person would want to mask or not mask. I am concerned, however, about the ability of witnesses to identify Mr. Brooks when asked to do so, and ultimately the jury making a determination based on identification. I do not believe that a blanket rule of no mask is necessary to do that. I think it's appropriate that Mr. Brooks be required to unmask anytime that a witness is being asked to identify him, and to do so for an appropriate amount of time. I don't know how many witnesses will be asked to identify him, but if there are, 75 witnesses and 50 witnesses are being asked to identify him, and each witness were asked to see him for at least a minute, 50 minutes is not an insignificant amount of time. I might also entertain a request that at least during some of closing arguments, that he remain unmasked, so that the parties can make appropriate arguments, and the jury can begin considering those things. Of course, they don't deliberate until they're in the jury room. I'm open to other means. I don't want to presume to know what types of photographs are coming in or evidence, but if it becomes appropriate to, for example, a booking photo, because that is unmasked and that is something that witnesses are also shown, that might be appropriate in light of his desire to remain masked. Ultimately, Mr. Brooks, what you need to know from me is that I will be asking the jurors during jury selection process about masks. I do that in any event. It's not special to your case. We have jurors who come in with masks. We have jurors who come in without masks. When witnesses come to the witness stand, I require them to unmask for purposes of their testimony, so that the jurors can judge for themselves the credibility. I think that's important. So if you take the witness stand, for example, you will be required to unmask. And so you just need to be aware as you make your personal choice about whether to mask or not, that in some respects it will have to be highlighted to the jury, even if it's with a question to them about that, not specifically as it relates to you, But there are some general questions in the voir dire script about that. And of course, temporarily unmasking for purposes of identification, and then perhaps an order that you unmask for portions of closing arguments. And again, and if he does choose to remain masked, then I would also entertain a request from the state, if you aren't already planning on using a booking photo or some other photo where he's unmasked to assist with identification. I think that's something I would entertain as well.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. What else is on your